I've been waiting 18 months for the chance to do this again, finally. The word edutainer has a bit of a bad rap amongst teachers. If you Google the term, the top 1 or 2 hits comes up with something like a combination of educator and entertainer, a great teacher, a hilarious comedian, an inspiring leader, and engaging performer. Really, if I was just one of those things, some of the time, that's already above the bar I'm used to. Is this level of expectation healthy? And should all teachers be really aspiring to this? What if you don't have the confidence to be funny and charismatic on demand? Does it mean that you shouldn't bother trying to teach? Can you develop a well-rounded speaker toolkit that is more than just being funny as a way to be engaging and inspiring? The answer is, of course, yes. And if it's your first time here, my name is Jack Wang, an Australian microbiologist and professor. This isn't only relevant to teaching, of course. It's for anyone who has to give a presentation as part of your job. There's no denying that you have a huge head start if you are naturally charismatic or funny. But it's not enough. My personal teaching mantra is substance over style, and trying to be funny is nowhere near the top of the list of things you need to worry about as a new teacher. Non-verbal communication cues, learning new software and AV technology, and designing lesson plans. All of these should take priority in your professional learning. If you're really focused on being a more entertaining communicator though, there are some heuristics, common rhythms and patterns that you can use, as well as different ways you can incorporate storytelling into your teaching. All this accumulates and becomes your speaker toolkit. You can use different tools for different talks and be effective without having to just be funny. I'm not under any delusion that I'm anything close to a comedian, nor do I worry too much about being funny in the classroom. I must give up some sense of fun as a presenter though, because I was just invited to do a science comedy show. It's actually the second time I've been invited, but last time it was shut down due to social isolation and quarantine rules. I'm really nervous, to be honest, and this video is my way of dealing with that anxiety. I'm still a good teacher if I totally bomb at this event tonight, right? My students will still respect me, right? So the event is finished and I don't really know how it went. I think it's a bit of a mental freeze and I think I need a bit of time to process just what happened to really make the most of it. Okay, let's talk about the nuts and bolts of non-verbal communication first. Your posture, upright, energetic yet relaxed, or a bit slouched, tired, not enthusiastic? Are you going to be a wanderer, or are you going to stay and stand in one spot? It depends a little bit on the size of the room you're in, and there's not really a right answer. It's what makes you feel most comfortable. Wandering a bit at the front of the classroom might help you redirect some of your nervous energy, and it's another way to keep your students on their toes. Let's say you move to a different side of the room to emphasize a different point, and back again. There's different stage cues you can work out. Now, being away from the podium means that laser pointers and advancing slides with the remote, all very doable. The benefit of standing still at the one spot is that you have more control. Closer to any computer, so you can coordinate slides and the lighting a little easier, and of course, microphones. A lectern mic, a radio lapel mic, or a karaoke style handheld mic. My personal preference is to stand still and use the lectern mic only because I don't trust wireless technology. I've had lapel mics and handheld mics run out of battery or break on me during class many times over the years. But of course, with any wireless option, the advantage is you can wander around and not stand still. Some people completely say no to handheld mics because they rely on hand movements and gesticulations to communicate their point, but you might not get that choice. Some rooms or venues only have one type of mic, so you got to make it work. Just learn to be adaptable and use each style of mic to their advantage and really switch it up over time. Some rooms use a lapel mic, other rooms try using a lectern mic or a wireless option. The ability to move around the room, use laser pointers and wave your arms around, that's a lot of movement and potential for distractions, so that could be a little too much of a good thing. And most of us also move in ways we're not quite aware of, and once you spot it, you can't look away. It's very jarring for yourself to watch. And what a lot of teachers do is film themselves as a professional learning exercise. You can spot a physical or vocal tic very quickly. One of mine, I used to say and so a lot more than I do now, hopefully. Nothing that obvious, but to me, it was so embarrassing, something I was doing without realizing it. Smoothing out my delivery style just made me seem more natural as a presenter over time. Back to hands and hand movements. Lots of it makes you seem upbeat and energetic, but maybe that's not the vibe you're going for. What if it's a really serious, presentation about a really controversial topic, it might not be too appropriate to go in there with your hands blazing. Maybe you want to come across as cool, calm, and collected, rather than someone with too much frantic energy. That's the time to hold on to something, to limit your natural inclination to move and bob around a little too much. You could put your hands on the lectern, hold something like a cup or a book or a pen. Karaoke mic might come in handy just about now as well. Where should you look when you're talking? If you're using AV and you have slides, then you can look at the slides as you're talking. That makes sense. Either on the projector, on the screen, or the computer from which the slides are being projected at. Either one's okay. But if that's all you're doing and you're only staring at the slides, you're shortchanging yourself from that audience connection. I'd say you need to be looking into the audience more than half the time, not just at the same audience member the whole time. That's a little strange and maybe a little creepy. Scan the room, this part, this part, this part. And also, you don't have to make direct eye contact with any one audience member. It's a little much. You switch between looking at their faces to just above the top of their heads from a reasonable distance. It looks like the same thing to them. Hopefully, you're not reading out your presentation. You don't need detailed notes to give an off-the-cuff talk. In most forums, you won't need to memorize it word for word, because if you do that, it can sound actually really robotic. Too scripted is not what people go for these days. I always practice in tandem with slides I'm using, and I'm memorizing the cues I see on screen so that if I see that diagram, I know kind of the next thing I need to say. Again, my rule, if you're staring at your slides only more than half the time during your presentation, instead of connecting and looking out into the audience, it's not a great experience for anyone. That was diving into the weeds, but now let's zoom out and think about what you're actually going to say or how you're going to structure your presentation. The first decision should be, how much audience interaction do you want? Me personally, I'm a big fan of active learning. I know my students retain, integrate, and apply new information much better if the first time they hear it, they're already getting a chance to interrogate it in some way. All my classes and talks have built-in questions and chances to discuss, not to mention some time to think. But it's really quite a luxury. Audience participation will take more time, and if it's a 5-minute talk you're giving, that's at least 1 to 2 minutes gone. Can a talk be engaging if you don't overtly interact with the audience? Of course it can. You just need other tools in your speaker toolkit. Numbered lists tend to help people manage their expectations of what you're gonna say. This is really big on YouTube as well. 3 aims, 5 tips, 7 objectives. As you move through that numbered list, people know how much is left to go, and this resets their expectations. Make the connections between the concepts or slides, make them explicit and obvious. Leading sentences like how this is related to that, or what these two things have in common is, or the biggest difference between these two ideas is, and I like to preempt the next slide with these kinds of connecting phrases, help people piece together the knowledge in their minds ahead of time and form that connection for learning. Storytelling, another great tool, it really helps. Start with a known historical example or a real problem or case study in your field, and this shows the audience a real example of applying the information that you're giving them. Stories have a start and middle with rising tension and higher stakes before hitting a crescendo and then a resolution at the end. Say a drug we're testing for a disease where there's no cure, and you can have some story about patients with that disease. No idea if the drug worked until we did our experiments, hit lots of obstacles and hurdles, research, and at the end, we know the answer. This is a good time to remind you that comedy is actually just one of the 7 narrative archetypes that are used in all sorts of storytelling, from books to TV shows and movies. There's rags to riches. An underdog gains some new privilege or money and has to come to terms with these new responsibilities and the world view that it comes with. The most famous example I can think of is Trading Places with Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy. It's a little old now, but still really great. Rebirth, changing your way to become a better person. The canonical example is A Christmas Carol with Scrooge visiting the ghosts of Christmas past. The hero's journey, the quest, voyage and return. Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, any of those movies or books. Tragedy, John le Carre's spy books or movies are my personal favorite. Never has a good ending. The entire history of your discipline has to be filled with fascinating details that falls into one of these categories. You can use drama just as much as you can use comedy to win people over. Having said all of that, you might be thinking, okay, Jack, that's all well and good, but I still want being funny in my speaker toolkit. I watched a million videos on YouTube, and all the celebrities who go on talk shows are funny, so that must have some value. Go and watch a YouTube channel, Charisma on Command. Lots of great videos and tips about communication, but the one caveat is that most of it seems to be geared around celebrities, and being powerful and beautiful tends to help more with charisma than any tool I can give you as part of your speaker toolkit. There are some things you can try that are lighthearted and universal. Self-deprecation. People like humility. Talk about how nervous you're feeling, how much prep you're doing, how you're getting in the way of them going to lunch or morning tea or afternoon tea. Hey, what's not to like about that kind of approach or that kind of speaker? Or lean into what people may be expecting of you. In this case, let's say I'm relatively young in my field of academia. I lean into that. Hey, I'm young, what do I know? I have to really work very hard to do reading to make up the difference and level the playing field so I can approximate how much the audience knows. Family drama and problems, also universal. Your kids keeping you up, your parents give you some unwanted advice, they're trying to give you tips on how to give a good presentation and you don't need it, or do you? All really simple stuff universally that can lighten the mood. All right, the science comedy event is over and I've had 24 hours to process what happened. It was a super fun event. Thanks to the organizers for inviting me. Both scientists and comedians were on the panel, and I'm really thankful that the comedians were there because I quickly realized I'm not anywhere in their league. I don't have the chops to improvise. I don't have quick one-liners, and everything was moving too fast. It's a total blur. I think I did okay. At least I didn't embarrass myself. I knew my limitations very quickly, so I just shifted into survival mode. Anyway, there's YouTube footage, I'm sure, of the event somewhere. There were lots of cameras on the night. If I find it, I'll link it down below so you can judge how cringy I was or wasn't on the night. I think it was a great learning experience, one that I got a lot out of, and hopefully I'm still adding new tools to my speaker toolkit right now as well. That's it for today. I'm Jack Wayne. See you next time.